Hey, Rockland, we're here with Sean Taylor from Cornerstone Christian Counseling. For some people, the holidays are a time of just the great joy, and for some people, they're a little tougher. And there's just all sorts of different situations that we can be in, and feelings we can feel, and all that kind of stuff. And so we wanted to get with Sean here to just walk us through a little bit of that. Tell us first. I don't know how long have you been doing what you're doing with Cornerstone? How long have you been therapist?
I've been a therapist since 2005 and started Cornerstone in 2009. So, yeah, quite some time, a couple decades, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
now. I specialize in marriage and family therapy. Cornerstone has all sorts of specialties from individual to couples to kids. And we really just emphasize being biblically sound and clinically excellent. So, combining biblical counseling with the best that psychology has to offer.
Mm-hmm. And
hmm
holidays are upon us here.
Yes.
And it can, like I said, be a time of great joy. Also create some drama and some sorrow and things like
Yes.
that.
Yeah.
Just doing what you've done, what are some of the biggest issues that you see people dealing with? Let's start there. Just over the holidays, biggest issues.
So, from what we've seen, the holidays are like a magnifying glass for your heart, both in and out. Things get amplified. So, if you're into the holidays, of course, like the twinkling and the traditions, they get amplified. People love them.
Mm-hmm.
If you've suffered loss during the holidays or if you're lonely, that gets amplified as well. And so, both the highs and the lows get amplified. So, how that works out is sometimes people are reminded of lost loved ones. People are reminded about holidays in the past and how they went. If they went really well or great, they want to repeat that.
Mm-hmm.
And they have great expectations, and oftentimes high expectations can lead to great disappointments as well. And sometimes it's seasonal affect disorder. That's a real thing. Like during the holidays, we have less light, and the seasons will actually decrease our mood, increase our susceptibility to things like depression or anxiety. And so we see that substance abuse increases oftentimes during the holidays. Even suicidality can increase during this season. So it can range from isolating oneself to abusing substances and everything in between.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So yeah, let's get into one. Because there's gonna be some people celebrating the holidays, and there used to be someone sitting around the table that's
Yes.
not there. Either they're just dead, they're no longer with them, or family has shifted and they've moved on, they live somewhere else, they're not able to be with them.
All right.
How do you deal with that during the holidays? What would you tell somebody about that?
That you should honor that. You should honor the loss. Honor the one that is not there. And I lost both my parents about a year and a half ago.
Mm.
And so this is my second holiday season without them. And I've learned to allow myself to grieve. And I think it's good to allow yourself to grieve and to know that the grieving process is not a succinct one. It's not just a linear process and then it's over. It is something that is cyclical oftentimes, and you experience different things during different times around that cycle as well. And to know that that's normal. And especially if it's a loss of a loved one, to know that the grief is an expression of love. You know that I grieve my parents because I love my parents
Mm-hmm.
and I miss them. And I can even feel it right now, as I think
Mm-hmm.
about that. And that's a good thing because that's my heart being expressed, my love being expressed, and their love for me as well. Um, so allow yourself to not only feel that, but even talk about it. It's good to engage and to journal about it. If it keeps coming up, maybe seek someone like a counselor to talk to about that. But start with just having conversations through prayer, through journaling, all that. The other, though, question was, what if you have maybe drifted away from family members?
Right.
So it's not a loss of a loved one, but it's a loss of that relationship, and they're
Mm-hmm.
still around.
Yeah, the table's different this year. Yeah.
Exactly, and that can sometimes be more difficult
Mm-hmm.
because there's some confusion. I mean, my parents aren't around because they died, and there is a finality to that, and there's also a clarity about
Mm-hmm.
that. But if somebody's not there because of some argument, some relational rupture,
Right.
that's a lot more complicated. And so that requires a little bit more maybe thought to work through. That could be more journaling, more conversations, more introspection. Either way, allow yourself to engage and work through. That's one of the best bits of advice that I can give for that. And don't retreat. Oftentimes we could retreat by just being quiet about it and saying, oh, everything's fine. We could also retreat by, I don't know, that's why alcoholism or drug abuse ends up increasing during the holidays, because people are pulling in and pulling away. That will keep that pain within and not allow it to get processed. So allow it to come out, push in, push through, and do that with others.
So, and even though, because I'm just picturing, like, say it's, you're gathering for a meal, and, the sort of matriarch of the family has passed in the last year or something like that. You're feeling something.
Yeah.
But other people are feeling the same thing.
Yes.
And so I'm trying to get in someone's head thinking, I'm going to clamp up because I want to be there because everybody else is grieving. I don't want to complain.
Yeah.
And so I'm trying to get into that dynamic a little bit too, of I'm feeling it. I know you guys are all feeling it too.
Yes. So a couple of tangible things that you could do during that time is to make the covert overt. So what you're talking about is you have that covert feeling. It's communal, people are feeling it. How do you actually make that overt, but in a productive way as well? It doesn't increase the tension or the conflict or anything like that. Some people will set the table and have a place setting for that lost person.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So that's a good way to honor them. Some people will put a candle, just a candle somewhere, and just say, this represents mom and dad, or this represents anybody who we wish were here, but isn't. Anytime you see the candle, we just encourage you to lift up a prayer of thanks for them. That could be a way that you could guide your family even. Anytime you see this candle, lift up a prayer of thanks for them. Ask God to help you to celebrate their life. And it's recognizing that they're a part of that event. Even if they're not there physically, that they're in your mind. They're there in your memory. And it's a good way to acknowledge that. Oftentimes the tension within ourselves is unacknowledged pain. But when we bring it out into the light, then there's a way of working through it and honoring it. So a biblical example for this, and this is one of my favorite verses, in 1 John, he talks about, John was inspired to write, walk in the light as he is in the light, and in so doing, we have fellowship with each other, and the blood of Christ cleanses us of all sin. I love that verse because it says, it starts off, if we walk in the light as he is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Christ cleanses us of all sin. There's an invitation there, and basically kind of cause and effect. If we do this, if we bring it up, make it overt, and do that together, we'll connect with each other. That's what fellowship is, right? Friendship. Yeah. And there's a cleansing as well. Jesus works through that. He loves to cleanse by bringing things into the light. Yeah. In community, especially.
Yeah. And I'm picturing probably two different types of people. I'll give you the example with me and my wife. Whenever there's, this won't be the case with us this year, but if we were going to have, if someone had passed and we're going to go Thanksgiving or Christmas is going to be more difficult this year for that reason, she will tend to pre-grieve a lot of it. And then once she's in the moment, she's like stalwart. She's sort of processed, and it's just like a sweet moment. I, on the other hand, am I'm not going to deal with it. I'm like, why are we thinking about this? We'll deal with it when we get to the moment. And then in the moment, I'm sort of a wreck. So my guess is that you deal with people that are all along that spectrum.
Oh, yeah. And some people are on the other side, rather than being present focused, they deal with it after the fact. Oh. So you have all three scenarios. Yeah. Yeah.
All right. So this is just counseling for me and my wife in the future. So to someone like me that is kind of maybe not quite this, but almost like pushing something down and avoiding, and then getting in the moment, then I feel like I'm going to be a wreck.
Yes.
Is it as simple as like just start processing it ahead of time?
Yeah.
Or how could someone, I'm using me as an example, but how could someone like that do that?
Yeah, I love that question. First of all, you exemplified having pre-consideration. Think about it ahead of time. And then ask, how do I want to engage this time? Like the holidays come around every time. this time of year, or every year
Right.
around this time, right? You've recognized a pattern. And when we can recognize a pattern, we're halfway to the solution.
Mm-hmm.
You recognize the pattern, and then you can ask, what do I want to do about that? What are my options? And you came up with a great option, which is maybe I could put some forethought into it.
Mm-hmm.
Or maybe I can recognize that that's how I do it. And the interesting thing about that is you're not saying, well, I need to do it differently. I need to do it like my wife does
Mm-hmm.
it, you know? And that could be a good way to do it. But even just recognizing that that's the way you do it and allows you to anticipate it and to
Right.
accept it. And if you want to do it that way again, then you can do so intentionally rather than reactively,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
And in so doing, you might actually show up to that event and say, okay, yeah, here it comes. I'm
Mhm.
feeling it.
Yeah.
I'm feeling it. And I knew that I would. And that's all right, because that's the way I've been designed.
Mm-hmm.
And you and your wife are on the same page with that too, because you've had these conversations already. You know that that's the way you do it.
Mm-hmm.
And she does it a little differently. And you can both then accept with and roll with your different personality types.
Mm-hmm. We had that when our oldest went to college.
Okay.
We went to college, and as we're sending her off to go to your thing,
Yeah.
Nikki's going, bye, and giving her hugs because
Yeah.
she's been dealing with it for a while.
Right,
and
there you go.
I could not get my words together.
Right?
we react
Yeah.
a little differently in those kinds of
Exactly.
situations.
Yeah, yeah.
So
And that's all right.
Yeah, so it's tough individually. The other one I want to really get to is if you're around during the holidays and you've got family or friends or whoever around, probably family, maybe we'll keep it to we know them better.
Mm-hmm.
And you're seeing something in them that I think there's something going on they're not dealing with in a healthy way, or maybe there's something going on in their own life.
Yeah.
What are some of those kind of signs and ways that you could think about? Here's a way to process that and deal with that.
Well, a couple of things come to mind there. Signs that we're struggling with something. These can be pretty intuitive if we put some thought into it. Oftentimes we as humans pull in and pull away,
Mm-hmm.
right? We get
Mhm.
quiet. Pretty common. And so if you notice that in somebody, you might think, okay, there might be something going on. They're thinking
Mhm.
about something. You know, they might be, you notice they're just looking off or into the corner, into space or something. Another way that we express struggle or consternation is by being quicker to respond aggressively, you know, and you might be quicker to be angry.
Mhm.
You might be, you might laugh more actually, and that might be just a more intense, uncomfortable way. Like,
Oh, really?
just
Okay.
some people
Yeah, I
will
see
laugh and then be like, oh yeah. You know, it's an uncomfortable laugh.
Yeah.
You could kind of sense it,
Mhm.
right? So those are three different ways that we express discomfort.
Yeah, I've noticed that and not even thinking about holidays right now. I'm just thinking of others that if there's something going on, the uncomfortable laugh is an interesting way to think of it. I don't really want there to be dead time in the conversation
Yeah, there
because
you
I
go.
feel like there's a subconscious. If there's a dead moment, someone might say, "Hey, how are you doing, really?" And I don't want that
Yeah.
because I've got some other junk going on.
Yeah. I don't want to open that cap,
Right.
you know, and like let that out.
Right.
That's Pandora's box.
Yeah, and especially maybe the holidays. If a family isn't that close, but they get together for the holidays,
Yeah.
and then all of a sudden you go, "I haven't really seen you in a year."
Yeah.
I may not want to. Our relationship is kind of dwindled. I don't really want
Right.
to open that up.
Right.
That can be a tough thing to do.
And that's a great point, and a segue into how to respond then,
Mhm.
right? That some people, that is their way of coping with it, and we should honor that. You know, some people
Wait, what's their way of coping with it? I'm sorry.
is one of those three ways.
Okay.
If you notice signs that they're uncomfortable,
Okay.
they laugh a little,
Right.
you know, something like that, or maybe they're a little sharp,
Mm-hmm.
you know, maybe they are pull in and away. To first honor that and say, you know, they're coping with this time, or
Mhm.
they're coping with something in their particular way.
Mm-hmm.
And then some of us will then say, okay, well, I don't want to bring it up because I don't want to open that cap, you know, or open that bottle, you know. And so from that point on, it takes discernment, because
Yeah.
you probably don't want to just engage in that conversation in the middle of your gathering and you haven't seen each other in 6 months.
Right.
And the reason being is you haven't earned the right to be heard,
Mm-hmm.
for one, in their life. They haven't gone through the necessary intro to become comfortable having that conversation. Like we generally have to wade into the cold water that is our heart. Like go through the shallow end. Don't just jump into the deep end. And when you're in the shallow end, assess and honor again. Like, do they want to go there? So with that first one, earn the right to be heard, first of all. And by doing, you might do things like, an embrace and a hug. It might be a look. It might be, I see you and I care. So those are ways of wading in, developing warmth, first of all. That earns more of a right to be heard, or more of a right, maybe a specific, a better way of saying it might be earning the right to have the conversation.
Okay.
Because you're not just trying to speak at them, you're trying to engage in a conversation, right?
Probably more important if they're opening up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's why I kind of shifted, in that, with that approach. But you're wading in, you're warming up, especially if you haven't seen each other in a while. And acknowledge that takes time. And oftentimes personal disclosure can warm things up even more.
In what sense?
So, for example, like me sharing that my parents passed away a year and a half ago,
right,
probably made it a little bit more easy for you to say, oh yeah, well, my wife and I, we struggle with such and such.
Yeah.
I'm disclosing something. If I said that at a party or a gathering, it helps other people. It gives other people the freedom to express that, because they say, oh, that's allowed here. We don't have to just put on a happy face. We can talk about our joys, and we could talk about our sadness.
Yeah.
It's allowed here.
And what's interesting is, you being a counselor, I'm almost wondering if you share something, if other people go, oh, well, the counselor, like like I get it as a pastor, like, well, the pastor is dealing with something. Because one of the things I'm picturing is like, we have a lot of our people that are Christians that will be with non-believers over the holidays. And so I'm sort of processing this, going, I wonder if because someone's looking at the Christian and go, oh, even this, my grandma that I respect, this wonderful Christian moral woman, is dealing with this. That may even almost have more impact to be able to open up a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, it's kind of recognizing maybe your role in the situation. It's probably similar to you. I find myself being the pastor of the gathering.
Right. We always think you're analyzing us whenever we're talking to you.
Yeah, exactly. So I might be the counselor of the situation or the pastor of the situation. Either way, we influence that situation. We influence that gathering. And know that, and pray about how you can positively influence that situation and bring a spirit of authenticity. And man, I mean, I'm reminded of Jesus's words where he said, it's something like, or is it maybe a proverb? I'm so bad at addresses. Better to go to the house of mourning than a house of laughter. Is that a proverb?
Sounds proverbial.
It sounds proverbial. Yes. And what I do know is that he was a man of sorrows, well acquainted with grief, and that we shouldn't shy away from that. And that could actually, if we could be more comfortable talking about not just, how are the great things in your life, but how are you doing otherwise?
Yeah.
Then it helps us to have deeper conversations as well, and more meaningful conversations. And when we have a gathering, then we can leave that gathering and we could say, so glad that it went. It's such a good conversation with such and such.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I find that the sort of reconnection and, hey, how are you doing? Especially if people are around, is just going to get me the big bullet points that happened in their life till I've seen them last time.
Yes.
That's about it.
And that's normal.
Yeah. Pulling them aside later and going, hey, I'm just curious how you're really doing.
Yes. And I love that. Yeah. I love then that you can foresee that initial interaction, or the interaction for that gathering, doesn't have to be your last interaction.
Right.
It's not the end all be all. You can call them up later and say, I noticed when we got together, it seemed like you were thinking about a lot of things. I'd love to go out for coffee with you.
Yeah.
I want to go for a walk, whatever the gathering is afterwards. Sometimes it's better one-on-one than in a group setting. Yeah.
I find that as long as because I'm not very good in those situations, but what I can do is I can say, I genuinely care about this person.
Yeah.
So if my filter is, I'm not trying to dig up dirt. I'm not trying to find out like what bad things happen so I can feel better about myself.
Yeah.
Bad things. If I'm going, I just care about you.
Yes.
And I just want to hear
Yes.
that. Then I almost am less interested in what are the actions I need to take, because that filter can tend to draw it out.
Yes. Yeah. Sometimes I can engage as the therapist.
Right.
Right.
Sure.
And it makes people feel kind of grilled, rather than if I can engage them in a more just a loving way, like you're talking about. Love covers over a multitude of sins, as they say. So if I can pray for a loving heart, and not just to fix it, or I'm just gonna be a blessing to them, or that superior mindset.
Right.
If I just say, help me to love them well. I mean, that could go a long ways, and people feel it then as well.
Yeah, and it seems like that's God's goal, is to demonstrate love, and so now you're His agent.
Yes.
In doing just that.
Yeah.
All right, so sometimes we're talking a little about loss, or I'd love to just get into drama, tension, just sort of unspoken things under the surface. People are now getting together. There's a thing we ought to talk about, but we're not going to talk about it. I'm just curious, like in those moments that maybe could just be broadly summed up as family tension.
Right.
Someone's about to walk into that.
Yes.
And they go, Sean, what should I do?
Yes. I love this question, especially if somebody's asking that question ahead of time. I know that I'm going to be getting into this situation. It's going to be tense. What do I do about it? And I think that is the best question to start with. What can I do about it? And to ask what I can't do about it.
Okay.
I think is another good question. And so know that certain situations you have limited influence over. And I can't change the way that my family members react. I can't. They are their own person, their own people, and they react the way that they react. I, though, can work on my own reaction, and I can work on my own reaction to their reaction. Yeah? And so especially if I can foresee certain situations, because they happen every year.
Right.
Right. Or they happen regularly, at least, or often.
I think most people going into it aren't surprised that there's a little bit of tension.
Exactly.
Like they know ahead of time.
And so if you can foresee that, you could say, okay, well, how do I want to show up? And what's the work that I can do ahead of time so that I can show up in that way? Because, like in, I think it's Alcoholics Anonymous, they have a phrase, clean up your own side of the street.
Okay.
Yeah. I think Jesus said something like, take the log out of your own eye.
Yes.
Something like that. And that's such good guidance, because if we can say, I have a hard time reacting or responding when they respond that way. Our first inclination is to say, I'm just not going to invite them, and that can be all right. That's an option. But you can also say, if they're invited to this gathering, I know how they're going to react, and I need to stop just pointing the finger at them and say, okay, how can I show up differently? And so sometimes practically that is working, like, again, journaling and praying through it. I react in this way. Help me to change. He could pray, help me to change that. Give me your fruit, because my fleshly fruit will not produce the results that I'm looking for. I'm just going to get angry and react in kind. And or maybe that's something you could bring up at your counselor or your pastor or your friend, and you talk through it. And so that's such great preparation. Also knowing your limits, and you can have boundaries, and say, if a boundary might be enforced by saying, if they bring this up, I'm going to change the topic. That's all right. Right. Being able to say, like, so oftentimes they bring up this point of conflict. What else can I talk about? And you can say something as overt as, I'd rather not talk about that here.
Or even like now, like we just had an election, it might be,
yes,
hey, can we just have politics be off limits?
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And or we're not trying to start an argument, here. And I would rather not. I want this to be an enjoyable connection time. And there's so many other things we could focus on right now. Yeah. And they would probably, most of the time, people agree with that. If they still press about it, you could say, well, maybe we could get together later, and talk about that. Would that be all right? And if they continue to press, you have every right to walk away as well. I got to go use the restroom. I got to go get a breath of fresh air.
Well, that's the 9th time tonight, Sean.
Exactly. I'm an old man.
Oh, well.
You could blame it on something like that,
Yeah. It is interesting because I do think that most of the people that are not surprised that there's tension.
Yeah.
That, like you said, this has happened every year. I love the idea of pre-thinking boundaries that honor them, but also can, would you say, protect yourself?
Yes.
I'm not sure what the word is.
Well,
for
I think so. That's a good way. Good way of saying it. Protect yourself, but also honoring your own limits as well. And the appropriateness of the situation as well. To be able to say this setting will not lend itself to a conversation about that.
Right.
At least a good outcome to that conversation. So you want to get together for coffee? I'm open for that. I'm open for that. So it's not a game over or never. It is time out, maybe later. That's oftentimes people will receive that.
Yeah, and that's healthy. I hope that people hear that as being empowered to be able to do that instead of you're so weak you have to set boundaries.
Yes, exactly. And maybe it's actually coming to terms with our weakness.
And maybe, to some degree. But it does give you the power and kind of feeling like ownership.
But it's empowering, to say, I struggle with this topic. And, and so having healthy boundaries allows me to have the comfort I need to engage. Boundaries in our decade that we're living in right now has led to things like cancel culture and just distancing ourselves from topics or other people groups. Boundaries are meant to actually help us to, I think, engage. At least I think that's the blessing of boundaries. It's kind of like, here's a metaphor. You're on a road, a 2-lane road, and you're going 25 miles an hour. A little stripe in the middle of that road helps you feel safe. That yellow stripe, right?
Yeah.
And somebody coming at you 25 miles an hour, it's all right. If they're going 70 miles an hour, you don't feel very safe.
Right.
And that's why we have divided highways. That's why we have barriers. But it's not to keep us from engaging or being close. In fact, actually, here with our freeway, you can have one barrier there and literally cars are going 70, 80 miles an hour right next to each other, probably within 10 feet. That boundary helps us actually to have proximity while feeling safe. That's an inch, for me at least, that was helpful to think about. I can have internal boundaries that help me to actually get closer to this person without feeling unsafe.
That's interesting. So if you preset a boundary of, boy, whenever he brings up his ex, we just go off the rails and it's never productive.
Yeah.
I'm going to set a boundary of, if that comes up, I'm changing the subject.
Yeah.
You're saying it can actually be it's boundaries seem like I'm pushing you away. Really what it's doing is saying, I now have the safety.
Yeah.
That's if that comes up, I'm going to scoot out of that. And that's what I was worried about, was you were going to bring that up. And now I'm not worried anymore.
And it allows you then to actually engage with him.
Yeah.
Knowing that there's some safety or some limits.
Yeah.
As well.
Yeah. And there's got to be a way to do that in an honoring way to the other person.
Yeah.
As well. And it's that's interesting because it is still saying, I love you. I'm for you. I want good for you.
Yeah.
And just, this is going to be better if we have this.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
One of the questions that came up was, we've talked about this a little bit, but when it comes to holidays with family, I get all nervous, fearful, sad, anxious, and tense. What suggestions do you have for me to deal with my emotions? Some of this you've talked about a little bit. I'm wondering if we can get real direct on that.
Yeah. Again, I appreciate the foresight and the awareness of the pattern. I react in this certain way, and then they're asking, what do I do about it? And we've talked about journaling, praying. We've talked about engaging conversation, even talking about counseling. You can talk with your general practitioner. There psychopharmacological interventions, we call it, like medication, can be helpful. And eating healthy, making sure you get enough sleep, things like that. Even supplements can help us with anxiety, depression. So to simplify it, I usually talk about with my clients, working from the outside in. Is your body well taken care of, healthy? Eating, sleeping, drinking good things that actually bring life to your body, knowing that in the wintertime it's harder maybe to exercise,
Right.
harder to get sunlight. Vitamin D helps with working through emotions. Then from your body to your mind and your heart, are you processing through those things that make you anxious or depressed? Are you actually working through them instead of shoving them away and saying, oh, I always get anxious about this. I just want to stop that from happening, right? So that's a symptom. Feelings are symptoms similar to the lights on our dash. And often, sometimes we just want to put some tape or duct tape over those lights, right? And the check engine light is on. How do I cover that thing up? Because it's just glaring in my eyes, And or sometimes we even avoid going to the mechanic because he might tell us what's really going on, and we're avoiding dealing with what's really going on inside. But again, it's just information. Emotions are information, similar to lights on the dash are information, and they're meant to tell you about something that's going on inside. What could be better and actually help you to address the core is asking, where are these feelings come from? Why am I feeling it? And then actually pressing in and through rather than away and avoid, right? In and through, to work through it, to press in, helps you then to work through that and stop the cycle as well.
So there's negative coping mechanisms. Some people just, I can't get outside, I'm not getting the sun, I'm not eating healthy because, it's the holidays and we're baking and chocolate and pumpkin stuff or whatever it is. So negative coping mechanisms, and then you started to talk about this. Some of the more positive ones, you were talking about vitamin D, just making sure you're not just eating garbage the entire time.
Right.
What are some of the other things that maybe some things you see that on the negative side or positive side? I'm curious.
Yeah, and it's interesting that actually negative coping skills can just be an exacerbation or an abuse of positive ones. Okay. So like drinking, something like that, like having a glass of wine or having sweets, having good food. Those can be good things, and they can lead to, or they can foster enjoyment. You can enjoy a good meal, but you take those too far and they can be negative coping skills as well. We can eat our feelings, as some people say, right? And, or we could get drunk and we can try. All these coping mechanisms are, again, distancing ourselves from our own feelings.
Okay.
We're trying to avoid our feelings. And instead of that, how can you actually feel the feelings and ask what's going on inside of you? So, again, that's more dealing with heart and head as well. Knowing that also things like exercise. Some people, I guess, can abuse exercise as well. That's a little less common, but exercise can be really healthy. Maybe a good acronym: HALT. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired.
Okay. That's
a good acronym. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. If I'm feeling any of those things, I need to take care of myself in particular ways. And those are pretty obvious. If I'm hungry, make sure I'm fed, because I can get hangry, right?
Yep.
A lot of us suffer from that. Angry. If I'm angry about something, address that. Why am I angry? Just simply asking, why am I angry? I'm feeling angry. I'm feeling my body's tense. Why? Lonely. What do I do with that feeling? Okay, acknowledging that I'm lonely, and that when I'm lonely and isolated, things can often get worse. There's a blessing to there can be a blessing to loneliness and a curse to loneliness. Being getting away and having a time of solitude and actually praying through what's going on inside. That could be an intimate time. It's supposed to be a relational time, but loneliness that's non-relational and just isolating can inflame what's going on and actually avoid what's going on. So, and then tired, make sure that you sleep well. HALT. That's a good acronym for taking care of ourselves.
That's real helpful. Yeah, it is interesting. All those over the holidays, it seems like you can be more susceptible to. I take some time off work, which is nice, but then it means I get back and my email inbox is full and I'm going till 8 o'clock at night or something crazy. So you can just have more on your brain and saying yes to every party and everything.
Yeah.
And now all of a sudden you go, and now I'm exhausted.
Yes, and that's actually another way to use halt.
Okay.
It's good to say no.
Mm-hmm.
And it's good to be able to ask, what do I actually want out of these holidays?
Mm-hmm.
And what do I not want? This year, I don't want to be frazzled. How do I make that happen?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to stay up till midnight wrapping presents.
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to be frustrated that my holiday cards, my Christmas cards are late this year. I don't want to get in conflict with my spouse or my siblings.
Mm-hmm.
And again, having that foresight and saying, okay, what do I need to limit and not do in order to have a better outcome? So I'm not going to say yes to all the gatherings.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm going to have a way of being able to assess gatherings that really want to go to
Mm-hmm.
or need to go to, and then gatherings that are optional and I need to stay away from.
Mm-hmm. With me and my wife, I say no easier than she does.
Yeah.
I can be a little quick on the draw to say no, we're not doing that. And so and she's quicker to say yes. So quite often she'll go, oh, that's interesting. Let me go talk to my husband about, and like just realizing she doesn't need to commit to something in the moment.
Yeah.
She can come back, we can talk.
Yeah.
And we can kind of talk through, do we really want to do it or not?
Yes.
Am I just being quick to go, no?
Oh, I love that partnership.
Yeah.
Yeah. And kind of testing your conclusions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, what do you think about this choice?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, all right. So tell me a little bit about counseling and what you do. Because I'd love to know, how does somebody get to a point of, I should be able to just kind of deal with whatever I'm dealing with by myself or with my family or pastor or something,
Yeah.
versus I think it's time to reach out to a counselor and have that conversation.
Yes. I think, first of all, to recognize that most of us have a propensity to try to do it on our own,
Right.
to our detriment,
Mm-hmm.
right? We just want to say, I'm fine. And because it's uncomfortable to engage in these kind of conversations with anybody. Right. It's kind of like when we avoid going to the garage or the mechanic to actually
Mm-hmm.
work on our car. We know that there's a cost to it, and the cost oftentimes it's discomfort, but
Mm-hmm.
also it can be financial and time as well if you're talking with a counselor. Just to know that that's our propensity, and oftentimes we give up time, we waste time, I should say, by not engaging in it earlier.
Mm-hmm.
And we could have so much more freedom sooner and more progress and growth and healing
Mm-hmm.
sooner if we dealt with it and if we deal with it sooner.
Mm-hmm.
Basically, in our field, if we recommend people go see a counselor when when whatever they're struggling with interferes with daily life.
Okay.
That's kind of the line. It interferes with daily life. So if you find yourself fixated on the gathering and you can't work through it, if you know that it's probably going to end up in a negative way or there's going to be a negative outcome and you don't know how to prevent that.
Mm-hmm.
If you're struggling with depression and just can't get out, or the anxiety, you just can't shake it, counselors are there to help you to work through, to find freedom,
Mm-hmm.
find healing.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's our role, basically.
Say it again. If it disrupts daily life, what'd you say?
It disrupts daily life and impairs it, and you can't work through it.
Okay.
It keeps on coming up.
Okay.
Really is a good way to assess that. Do I need to see a counselor?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes people actually just say, I want to do this better, and I want to see somebody who specializes
Mm-hmm.
in doing it better. And so like they'll come in for, it might be kind of more coaching,
Mm-hmm.
but oftentimes it is still a healing process, working through the past
Mm-hmm.
in order to have a better future. And that's oftentimes what a counselor does, is helps you to work through the stuff that happened in the past. Let me rephrase that. The things that are going on in the past that are still impacting your present. They're still there, and they keep coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So a counselor helps to unlock that and to have a new experience with your memories, a healed experience.
An interesting way to say it.
Yeah.
So I want to press into that because the impression. So I've been to therapy before, and it's nothing like the movies.
Right.
But if no one's ever been, it's their first time,
Yeah.
or maybe they had a bad experience with a counselor, which, as you know, happens as well.
It does.
what is the experience like? Like, can you just flesh out the actual interaction between a counselor and do you call them patients, clients?
Yeah, mostly clients.
Clients.
Is what we say.
Yeah. Laying back on a leather couch and
yes.
tell me about
So
your
it's not like
childhood.
Freud. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sitting behind the leather couch. Oftentimes it starts like this, just a conversation between two people, and it's sharing the story. So, and sometimes people will not go to a counselor because they say, I don't even know what to talk about. A good counselor will allow that to come to the surface and help to create a safe atmosphere that makes it easy to start to open up. And they'll, again, start gently and start in the shallow end, and then slowly get into deeper waters with you, and narrow and help work with you to narrow in on those points that are really impacting you, that maybe you don't even realize are impacting you. Those points from your past, those points within yourself, that if they were addressed, you would have such a better experience of life. You would stop the dread or stop the anxiety, stop the depression, because you've healed from the things that cause the dread, the anxiety, and the depression. You've actually worked through them.
Yeah.
And a good counselor won't force that. They'll ease one into that.
Yeah. So that's what I was going to ask. I'm in therapy with you, let's say, and I bring something up and it's super sensitive. We need to talk about this because that's the thing. My walls are still up a little bit.
Exactly. Yeah.
How do you determine how to sort of press in versus how to move on? Because go ahead.
Yeah. Well, we have a concept called pendulating. Okay. So like a pendulum or like the ticking of a grandfather clock, you kind of pendulate in, and it's kind of like testing it out, like saying, okay, I'm noticing this, Jim.
Yeah.
And
if I smack it back.
Exactly. It's like, okay, I know that there are some defenses.
Yeah.
Okay, so we need to ease our way into that.
Which probably means you need to talk about, you hit the right spot.
Exactly.
Because I don't want to talk about it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So we could back up a little bit, but not forget that.
Okay.
And so if we can work through those things, then there is healing. And there's different techniques that allow a person to process those feelings.
And they're specific to the person. Like,
they are specific.
I'm picturing someone listening going, great, now I'm going to go in and he's going to go, tell me about your feelings. I don't like talking about my feelings.
Exactly.
So it's
and a lot of
customized.
That's a good way to put it. It's customized. So to back up, when you go see a counselor, they're going to go through an assessment phase to ask you your story, to ask about the outside in, like how are you doing physiologically, physically, mentally, relationally. We're going to do what's called a biopsychosocial spiritual evaluation.
Okay.
Biologically, how are you doing? Socially, how are you doing? Biopsycho, how are you doing psychologically? And then spiritually, how are you doing in your relationship with God? What does your spiritual life look like? And then that helps us to gain a greater awareness about what you're experiencing. It helps you to also be able to talk through that, because a lot of times during this assessment phase, they come to realizations about what's actually impacting them. So assessment, and then there's a treatment plan, which is basically, what do we do about it? And a good counselor will help you to kind of figure that out. They have a lot of options, a whole menu of options in their mind because of their education. And then they'll be able to say, well, these are options, optional courses for addressing what's going on. And then they'll walk with you through that journey and stick with you until you experience the freedom that you're looking for.
So for someone who is thinking, I'm kind of feeling maybe a little depressed right now, for example.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what step to take. And by the way, I will say Cornerstone Christian Counseling, we have several people from Rockland that have gone there, and I recommend them in the highest. How do they, like, if someone's going, I'm not really sure if I even need to call or not. So they do make the call.
Yeah.
Just give a little bit, you started to, but give us a little bit of sort of the intake process where you go from there.
So the intake actually starts before you meet with your counselor. You can call up and we have a front office staff, our intake care coordinators, and they'll pick up, or you can text or email. They'll guide you through the process. They'll say, okay, well, tell me what you're looking for. And you could say, well, yeah, during this time of year, it seems like I struggle with this, or I'm just struggling with depression, or I don't know, something's just bothering me. And they'll say, okay, where do you live? When can you meet? They'll ask, do you want to meet with a man or a woman? And
You'll do online or in person,
online,
right?
exactly. And we make it as easy as possible for you. And then the counselor will meet you, and online or in person, and just start the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
You're free to stop whenever you want to. Most people, they find that their counselor will guide them through the process, and make it easy for them.
Mm-hmm.
And that starts from the initial phone call to the time they meet with their counselor, and to the time they experience that healing.
How often does it take to click? How soon do people usually click? Like, I know people that have gone, they went to one session and went, I'm not healed yet.
Yes, I would suggest you meet with your counselor at least 3 times.
Mm-hmm.
And because one of the best predictors of positive outcomes is your relationship with your therapist. You connect with them. If you feel like they get you, the good test. Like, do I feel like Jim's reading me well if you're my therapist, right? And do they have like what it takes to help me with the next step? Like, I think what they're proposing, okay, I can roll with that.
Yeah.
I think it might be. I think they're onto something.
Yeah.
Right. So
yeah, it's probably a lot about posture of the heart as someone comes into, if they come in skeptical.
Some people are like, well, I tried counseling, it doesn't work. Of course it's not going to work. But if you're looking to really address what's going on and take ownership and actually do the work, then they're there to assist you, and you just need to find the right person. A lot of counseling agencies are I don't know about a lot, but at least at Cornerstone, we think it's so important to find that good fit that if you don't have a good fit with that therapist, we'll set you up with a new therapist free of charge. That next session is on us because we believe it's so important, and we want you to get where you want to be, from where you're at to where you want to be, and we want to assist you in the process.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Thanks for doing this.
Oh,
this
yeah.
is Sean Taylor, Cornerstone Christian Counseling. Thanks so much. I think you've helped a lot of people in the holidays.
I hope so. Yeah, I hope so.
Thank you. I appreciate you.
Yeah, good being here.